The Store-Bought GPS, 2003. A Marine sergeant in Afghanistan mails his mother a Christmas list, night vision goggles, a shortwave radio, a handheld GPS. This is not a joke. The goggles alone run about $2,000. Her son fights for the richest military on earth. She is shopping for his war gear. He was not the only one. Marines in Afghanistan, soldiers in Iraq. The Pentagon's own report on the war wrote it down. Troops were buying their own radios, their own packs, their own GPS units, with their own paychecks. Here is the strange part. Not the price, the picture on the screen. A hiker's GPS from the camping aisle. A little radio inside. It could show every man in a squad as a dot on one small map. The Army had spent a decade building a machine that promised that exact picture. In 2003, that machine still was not in Iraq. The dots were. This is that story. Soldiers who became their own supply officers. That machine and a second one. 20 years. Billions. Chasing what a store shelf already sold. The receipt the Army finally signed, admitting its soldiers had been right all along. Start with the box the Army did hand out. The Precision Lightweight GPS Receiver. Soldiers called it the plugger. It told you where you were, a set of coordinates on a small screen. Your position, not your squad's. Where the rest of your team was, the plugger could not say. So in 2003, as the columns rolled toward Baghdad, American soldiers did their own shopping. The after-action reviews say it plainly. Many soldiers bought commercial systems rather than use the issued receiver. The most popular was a Garmin, the Rino. Here is what $194 bought that year. 7.6 ounces of plastic, 3 AA batteries, a GPS with a walkie-talkie built in, and one trick the plugger never learned. Link up to 50 of them, and every user appears on every screen. Your whole team. Moving dots on a map in your palm. Nobody built a network for that. No tower, no contractor, no server farm in a desert. The little radios simply told each other where they were, and the map filled itself in. $194 on a shelf next to the fishing rods. Squads used them the obvious way, keeping track of each other across sprawling bases and moving convoys. Glance down, find your team. The question a decade of military engineering kept circling, answered by the camping aisle. Be fair to the Army for a moment. The Rhino had a hole in it, and it was not small. The radio side was a consumer walkie-talkie band, the same family radio channels sold for ski trips. Wide open, unencrypted. Anyone with the right receiver could listen in, which is why most units rarely keyed that radio at all. The Army's obsession with secure communications was not invented stupidity. It was physics, plus an enemy with ears. And the deeper problem was not even the eavesdropping. A military receiver that gets jammed tells you so. A retired Marine officer later ran the comparison in a simulation of a jammed route into Baghdad. The military receiver threw a warning onto its screen and refused to guess. The civilian receiver kept drawing the map, as much as a kilometer off, and never said a word. A store GPS that is wrong with a straight face. The official receivers carried the opposite curse. The newest ones needed cryptographic keys, which turned a lost receiver from a store return into a security incident. But the dots did not care. The positions still flowed. The map still filled. The thing the soldiers actually needed, knowing where their friends were, worked out of the box, on batteries from the gas station. Now, that Christmas list. The sergeant who wrote it had company. By 2003, the fastest procurement office in the American military was a soldier with a paycheck and his mother's shipping address. His list did not stop at the GPS. Night vision goggles, about $2,000 a pair, a shortwave radio, and one more item, in his own words. Another cool thing to bring with you is an American flag. His reason, just in case you plan on conquering anything. That is the sound of a man who has stopped waiting for the system and started packing like a tourist with excellent aim. The Pentagon wrote the pattern down itself. Its lessons learned draft from the war lists what troops were buying with their own money. Better field radios, extra ammunition carriers, commercial backpacks because the issued rucksacks were too small, An internal Army review that same summer found ground troops in Afghanistan and Iraq dipping into their own pockets for the gear they needed to fight. The logic was not complicated, and every private could recite it. Upgrades reached the infantry last. If the store had it now, and the system had it someday, now won. Marines wrote home for it. Soldiers bought it wherever they found it. Everyone landed in the same place. The store was faster. The pattern outlived the invasion year. Through 2004, a National Guard transportation company was running convoys of 60 to 80 vehicles through Iraq, with about 7 military radios between them. 7. So roughly 20 of its soldiers went shopping, $40 family band radios and Garmin Rhinos. Their captain's logic, as reported at the time, was that any radio beat no radio. One soldier's Rhino kept working after his vehicle's built-in radios quit, and the seller was keeping the score the Pentagon was not. Garmin confirmed it had sold thousands of Rhinos to deployed military personnel. A military journal later noted that Garmin's annual reports for those years printed letters from Marines, sailors, and soldiers describing how they used its receivers at war. The receipts had reached the shareholders before they reached the requirement writers. Their money worked. That is the embarrassing part. The worst part? None of it was new. This exact experiment had already been run 12 years earlier in Desert Storm. GPS was brand new. The Army owned 500 demonstration receivers for an entire war, and it plugged the gap the same way its soldiers later would. It rushed thousands of commercial units to the desert, Trimbles and Magellans, straight off the civilian market. The Army's own history of that campaign adds one line, almost as an afterthought. There were instances of troops buying their own GPS devices. 1991, the first satellite war, and soldiers were already paying for their own navigation. Think about what that means. Commercial receivers against the official pipeline in a live war, and the store won. The result went into a report. The report went into a drawer, and the lesson evaporated on contact with peacetime. So when the soldiers of 2003 reached for their wallets, they were not improvising. They were repeating. The second run of a proven experiment funded the same way as the first. And here is what makes this a story instead of a shopping tip. While those receipts were piling up, the Army had been building the official answer all along. A computer for every soldier, with the whole squad on a map. Exactly what the Garmin did, only bigger, harder, military. It had a name. It had a budget with more zeros than the whole camping aisle. It had been in development since before some of those soldiers could drive. 2 machines. Then a confession. That is the rest of this story. The name was Land Warrior. The idea was born in 1989 in a General Electric lab. Put a computer on every infantryman. By August of 1994, it had an official name, a program office, and a promise. The promise was exactly the picture those Garmins would later draw for pocket money. Every soldier's location on a digital map, every friendly position updating live, the whole squad visible at a glance. On paper, a genuine leap, a computer for the chest, a digital map of the battlefield, a radio tying the squad into one picture. On paper. Then the machine met the contractors. General Electric handed it to Hughes. Hughes became part of Raytheon. Motorola took a turn. Then a firm called Exponent. Then General Dynamics. 5 owners across a decade, each inheriting the last one's wiring, and every redesign added something. More capability, more cable, more battery. The version that finally went to war weighed 16 pounds. 16 pounds. Now put it on. The computer rides your back. The cables run across a chest already covered in armor plates. The battery presses into you next to the water and the ammunition you were carrying anyway, in Iraqi summer heat, on foot, through doorways. 16 pounds of promise, reminding you with every step that someone in an office believed in it. The soldiers rendered their verdict in one sentence. A soldier told Popular Mechanics, It's just a bunch of stuff we don't use, taking the place of useful stuff like guns. That sentence cost more to earn than it looks. By then, the program had burned roughly $500 million in development money. Count the wider family of soldier computer efforts over the previous 10 years, and the accounting runs to about $2 billion. In February 2007, the Army agreed with the soldier. Lieutenant General David Melcher said it in public. "We just don't see that as a long-term solution." The weight and the battery life had killed it. Land Warrior was dead. 3 months later, 229 sets of it boarded planes for Iraq anyway. The 4th Battalion, 9th Infantry Regiment, the Manchus. Their brigade had trained on Land Warrior, and by special request, the canceled system was kept alive for their deployment. Then the soldiers did to the machine exactly what they had done to the supply system. They took over. A defense reporter who embedded with them watched it happen. They consolidated parts and whittled the 16-pound ensemble down to a little more than 10. The digital gun scope, too slow and clumsy for urban fighting, was abandoned. One soldier, a man named Garza, put the real problem in plain words. The bulk was not a problem for clearing buildings. It was a problem for getting in and out of the striker hatch, and for hopping walls on raids. Then they started inventing. The Manchus suggested features no program office had specified. Digital chem lights, green marks a leader could drop onto every soldier's electronic map, a building to hit, an escape route, an enemy position. During air assaults on Bakuba, the helicopters kept putting troops down a quarter or half-kilometer off target, and a trail of green lights on the map walked them through the dark to the objective. Look at what that is. It is the Rhino's dots grown up. Handed a 16-pound canceled system, the soldiers deleted half of it and rebuilt the rest around the one idea they had already paid for at the store. Everyone sees everyone. And in Iraq, the verdict flipped. The men who had voted to throw the thing away started planning missions around it. A company commander, Captain Brandon Kint. Land Warrior gave me confidence as I planned to coordinate for a blind hit at night for the first time in this area. A Master Sergeant, Mark Griffith. It's one piece of equipment that we won't leave the field operating base without anymore. The money came back that July, while they were still deployed, and it came back over the Army's head. The Senate Armed Services Committee earmarked $80 million to revive the program the Army itself had just killed. Congress was now routing around the institution too, one budget line at a time. The next Stryker Brigade requested 1,000 upgraded sets, and the version that went to Afghanistan with that brigade in 2009 tells you who had really designed it. A $70 million contract delivered a system at 7.2 pounds, less than half of the 16 pounds the Manchus had lugged to Iraq. The headline features text messaging, maps that leaders could update on the move, and virtual chem lights. The Manchus field hacks, productized. The institution shipped the soldiers' own design back to them and called it an upgrade. A platoon sergeant preparing for that deployment said it plainly. If I cannot see my soldiers, I can look on Land Warrior and know exactly where they are. So Land Warrior ends as the strangest kind of failure. The idea was right. The soldiers eventually wanted it, and it still took 13 years from the day it got its name and $500 million to field at 16 pounds. A picture the camping aisle sold at 7.6 ounces. That was machine number 1, the display. The real monster was the radio underneath, and the radio never made it out of the building. The Joint Tactical Radio System, JTRS. It was born from a real wound. In the Gulf War, the service's radios could not reliably talk to each other, and the memory of that stuck. The Cure, formally launched in 1997, was going to be one family of software-defined radios for everybody, every service, every vehicle. In June of 2000, Boeing won the contract to draw the master blueprint. Then the requirements started breeding. Within 2 years, the blueprint had tripled in size. The wish list grew to 33 different waveforms, 33 languages of radio traffic that one box was supposed to speak fluently, on the requirement sheet at least. While that blueprint was tripling, the Garmin on the store shelf spoke exactly one: position, chirped quietly between up to 50 handhelds. It did not need a master blueprint. It shipped, worked, and was replaced by a slightly better one the next model year. 2 product cycles for the store shelf, 0 for the program of record. The wish list did this to the hardware. In 2002, Boeing was handed $856 million to develop and start building 10,000 radios. More than 3 years later, the number of units meeting the size, weight, and power requirements was 0. Not 0 delivered, 0 buildable. The flagship waveform alone ran to over 1.6 million lines of software code, and the software made the radio fat. More code demanded more processing. More processing demanded more power. And more power meant a box bigger and heavier than anything the requirement had promised. In April 2005, the Pentagon sent Boeing a show cause letter, the formal step before firing a contractor. Most of the money was already gone. The man who ran the Pentagon's weapons testing world in those years, Thomas Christie, would sum up the program's leadership in 7 words: everything they've touched has turned to crap. The program's own post-mortem named the quieter disease underneath. The software and the hardware were being developed at the same time. Still, the program ground on, and the numbers moved in opposite directions. The requirements were cut from 33 waveforms down to 8. The cost per radio doubled anyway, to around $300,000 apiece. And while everyone waited for the perfect radio, the Army kept buying the old kind to fill the gap. 300,000 legacy radios, $11 billion of stopgap through 2006. You know the tune by now. Same wars, same wallet. In 2010, the Army finally put the flagship, the ground mobile radio, in front of the people it was for. 1,000 combat veterans at Fort Bliss, Texas. Men who had carried radios through 2 wars looked at the future of military communications and criticized its size, its weight, its short range, and its tendency to break down. The Pentagon's own test office wrote the autopsy in prose no contractor could spin. In its formal report, the radios had difficulty establishing a stable network, poor throughput, unsatisfactory message completion rates, and poor operational reliability. A truck-mounted radio with a usable range of 7 to 10 kilometers, so short it needed 2 dedicated relay trucks to cover ground it was supposed to cover alone. The head of that office, Michael Gilmore, gave Congress the number that ended the argument: a 72% failure rate. He told Congress the ground radio had demonstrated little military utility. The Pentagon's own chief weapons tester, on the record about the Pentagon's flagship radio. The colonel who spent 3 years of his career trying to save the ground radio wrote the tombstone himself. We tried to make it better and better and better. You can date the delusion precisely, because both halves of it are in the record from the same year. In the spring of 2010, the Army announced plans to buy at least 153 of the radios, the communications backbone for equipment headed to Afghanistan in 2012. That October, Boeing announced the radio had completed system integration testing and stood ready to be the secure communications backbone of Army modernization. The Pentagon's test office, watching the same radio in the same test cycle, wrote the deficiency list you heard a minute ago. 2 announcements and 1 report. Same radio, same year, opposite realities. 12 months later, the report turned out to be the true one. One more moment of fairness, because it matters here more than anywhere. JTRS was not chasing a fantasy. Secure, jam-resistant, universal military networking is genuinely hard physics, and the Garmin never solved it. The Rhino's little radio was open to anyone with ears. No army can run a war on a channel the enemy can hear. The ambition was legitimate. The indictment is what the process did to a legitimate ambition, a wish list that bred faster than engineering could deliver for a decade and a half, while the store shelf iterated past it every single year. On October 13, 2011, the Pentagon canceled the ground mobile radio. 15 years, $6 billion. The number of working radios it put into soldiers' hands, 0. Not one radio. That sentence is the entire program. And this is the moment the whole story snaps together. Go back to October 2002, before the invasion of Iraq, before the Christmas list made the newspapers. The Army's Vice Chief of Staff had already seen what was coming, because his soldiers in Afghanistan were already buying their own gear. That month, he ordered a new program into existence with one job: find out what soldiers were spending their own money on and start issuing it. It was called the Rapid Fielding Initiative. $400 million, described in print at the time as an effort to improve the things soldiers had been buying with their own money. Now read what it actually did. Among the gear it fielded, it issued Garmin Rhinos to the 82nd Airborne Division. Picture what that meant. The United States Army, the institution running 2 flagship programs to network the infantry, walked past both of them, bought the camping aisle GPS its own riflemen had been buying at retail, and handed it out as official equipment. The workaround became the policy. The mother with the shipping address had been doing the Army's procurement job, and in October 2002, the Army quietly took the job back, receipt and all. By 2005, the program had equipped 200,000 deploying troops. The institution never held a press conference to admit the soldiers had been right. It did something more honest. It paid. Even the plugger's official replacement finally showed up. The DAGR, the military handheld the pipeline had owed its soldiers all along, went into production in March 2004. 1 year after the invasion, those soldiers had walked into carrying receivers from the camping aisle. It weighed under a pound, against the plugger's 2 3/4. By 2007, the bill across America and its allies had passed $430 million for more than 185,000 receivers. The system could deliver after all. It just delivered one war late. The ending of the machine story is the same joke, told bigger. Land Warrior's successor was renamed Nett Warrior in 2010 after Medal of Honor recipient Robert Nett. And when Nett Warrior finally reached soldiers in 2013, the computer on the chest was not a custom military wearable at all. It was a Samsung, a Galaxy Note 2. Street price around $700. Bought at commercial price, wiped clean, loaded with Army software, and strapped to the chests of Rangers and the 10th Mountain Division. The software came from the same surrender. The Android Team Awareness Kit. Government-written code running on ordinary commercial phones, built by an Air Force research lab starting in 2010. Within a decade, 250,000 users. The map with the dots on it, at last, at scale, on a phone from a store. Even the radio dream arrived in the end, sideways. A smaller handheld line survived the wreckage of JTRS, and in February 2012, Army Rangers in Afghanistan took its Rifleman radio on its first formal combat run. A small handheld with a display screen showing nearby friendly forces on a digital map. The announcement, from the program's own manager: "We have just entered the era of the networked soldier. The individual rifleman now has a game-changing capability." 9 years after Garmin printed that capability on a shelf tag for $194. The Army never beat the $194 Garmin. It joined it. 20 years, 2 flagship machines, and billions of dollars later, the networked soldier finally arrived. A store-bought phone, running free government software, drawing the picture the dots had drawn all along. One last image. A mother in 2003 reading a list. Night vision goggles, a shortwave radio, a handheld GPS. She bought what the richest military on Earth could not deliver, and she got it there by Christmas. The Army fixed the symptom. It bought the Garmins, then the Samsungs. It never fixed the machine that made her necessary, the requirement sheet that grows, the program that slips, the store that ships. You have met this machine. It is every official tool nobody uses while the free app on your phone does the job. And the phone keeps upgrading, because that is what phones do. The Note 2 gave way to a chest-mounted Galaxy S20. By late 2024, the Army was testing the Galaxy S23 Tactical Edition as the next one, with about half the force fielded. The soldier system of the United States Army is now, in practice, a phone contract. That race is still being run today, and the store is still winning. Somewhere tonight, a soldier is charging a phone the Army bought at retail. Same aisle, same dots, same receipt, 20 years long. The pattern is not confined to navigation. The Army banned the world's best body armor. It defended the world's worst earplug. The Navy lost to a $30 Casio from a gas station. Different gear, same architecture. The full collection is in the playlist on your screen. If this made you want to go deeper, the 2 books that shape this video are linked in the description. And so is the vault, where I keep the full script research and everything that didn't make the final cut. Subscribe for more.